is your co-host Jim.
What's your vector, Victor? little airplane reference.
It never gets old. I've watched that movie at least 100 times. It never gets old.
But strangely relevant.
Also joining us is your co-host Hunter.
Helm 108. I'm sorry. I get a kick out of that. If you ever watch The Fifth Element, it's just like they yell at this guy behind the glass, and you're just like, "Look, man,
Is that
you
a
don't have to yell at him.
is that
He's
a real
right there?"
Is that a real guy or an android? He looks like a plastic
Maybe
android.
it was supposed to be an android, but it was just like, Jesus, like you just heard your captain say "Helm to 108," and you don't have to turn around and yell it to the guy right behind.
Well, maybe
you.
the
Like,
guy
come
is
on.
stressed because his captain's a dick, so he gets his stress out by yelling at this android that can't yell back. I don't.
No, maybe
That-
Maybe
that
the
movie-
android is hard of hearing.
That movie does
I don't know.
have many layers to it.
like an onion or an ogre,
like a
or a
blooming,
parfait.
like a blooming onion, like a
Multipass.
like a honeycomb cereal. Many layers.
Yes. And
Yeah,
and our guest, a man of many layers.
we do have a guest this week, my friends. Jim, did you want to introduce him? It sounds like you did. You
You know, I've been trying to have a conversation with Ken for like 8 years. It was back when. No, seriously, I talked to him on ICQ. Like back whenever I
Damn,
bought-
son.
I know, right? That dates it, right? So it was Attack Vector Tactical, and it was Ad Astra, and he was foolish enough to actually put his contact info for IM on the thing. So yeah, it was like we spent a couple nights yammering, and then it's always just been like, wow, I wish I could get him on the phone or something. So my conspiracy has finally borne fruit, and he's here, Mr. Ken Burnside.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Yep.
Your conspiracy has been subtle and taken many years. And either it's subtle or you've had many distractions. And I suspect it's a bit of both.
Well, it's a little ADD.
So yeah, our guest this week, folks, is Ken Burnside of Ad Astra Games, basically the owner of Ad Astra Games, which is not only behind the game we're going to be talking about today, Squadron Strike Traveler, but a bunch of other stuff like Attack Vector Tactical. Is that the prequel to this game? Is that like the precursor to this, or is that a different...
Not quite.
Okay.
Attack Vector is a different game engine. There
okay.
are some similarities between it and Squadron Strike. I also publish Birds of Prey. And, of course, Squadron Strike Traveler is a supplement to the basic Squadron Strike game engine.
Right. And Traveler is kind of a big deal, isn't it? That Traveler's been around for 1,000,000 years, right? Or a long time.
Traveler has been the go-to sandbox science fiction role-playing game since, the late 1970s. It has been more or less in print in some version or another for going on 40 years now. And I'm really pleased that I got the license, and there are some interesting stories about this product and how it almost never came to be. So I look forward to sharing some of those with you.
Oh, cool. So who actually has the role-playing game license at this point?
Right now, Far Future Enterprises is producing Traveler 5, and Mongoose Publications is producing Mongoose Traveler, which is closer in spirit and mechanics to the original Little Black Book Traveler game. GURPS Traveler ceased to be as of December 31st of last year. After 18 years, Steve Jackson Games decided that it wasn't worth the time to renew the license one more time, and there it went. However, most of the GURPS Traveler stuff is available online. At least the Journal of the Traveler's Aid Society, and you can still find a lot of their books in used bookstores, and they're really good.
So sorry, let me ask this real quick, Jim.
Okay.
I've never played Traveler before. I've never even read any of it, which I know is a failing. Where should I start?
As to where you should start, I would actually pick up Mongoose Traveler at this point as the place to begin, just because the game engine is much simpler. But at its very, very, very extremely pulled back view, I want you to imagine that the Firefly, the TV series Firefly, with the crew of colorful characters running around, isn't running away from the Alliance so much as they're working on the fringe and the backwaters of, say, a grand galactic empire that is somewhat more ethical than, say, the Empire of Star Wars. And then you've got something that's pretty close to Traveler.
Yeah, when you
Oh.
said Firefly, Brian's hair stood up a little bit.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Clear.
There is a common rumor, myth, urban legend, whatever you want to call it, that a large chunk of Firefly grew out of the game session notes and GM prep that Tim Minear and Joss Whedon were using for running a Traveler game when they were both in college together.
Oh, so I think I've got so I should start with the Traveler Core Rulebook. There it is.
Hold on, let me get Josh on the phone.
Oh yeah, about $30. Okay.
So the original was Traveler, right? And then there was like Traveler 2300, and then Mega Traveler, and I can't remember back that far with any accuracy, but I remember there was a lot of forks of Traveler, even in the early. Who actually started that thing out?
That would be Mark Miller, and it originally started out with Traveler. Traveler 2300 was an entirely different game engine and completely separate from the background of Traveler. Mega Traveler was an attempt to revamp the game engine. Mark Miller's Traveler, or Traveler 4, came out in the mid-1990s after the dissolution of GDW. GURPS Traveler came on out in the 1990s, right about the time that GDW was running into financial problems. Mongoose Traveler came out after the Open Game License, and Traveler 5 is the current iteration of Traveler done by Mark Miller.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I've played, well, I could say I've tried to play Traveler a few times, but I always died in character creation because I have really evil dice. What game was that? What game was that we had a developer on here? It was like 6 months ago or so, and you could actually get killed in character generation.
Well, there was a game,
and I talked about Traveler at length then.
There was a game, I don't remember that one, but there was a game from the late 70s, early 80s called Space for the Apple II. And it actually used the Traveler. It actually got into some legal trouble because I believe it actually was using the Traveler system for character creation. So I died like 3 times just making my character in that game. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, Traveler was, as I remember it, fairly brutal. How was it, like combat wise? Was it meant to be a fairly deadly system, or was it a little more space opera?
It was meant to be a pretty deadly system from the get-go. Everybody who was
my
involved.
experience was normal then.
Yeah.
This was no Star Frontiers, that's for sure.
Yeah. If you're getting in a fight in Traveler, you had better be attacking from an ambush. If you're getting in a fight in Traveler and you are not the one in the ambush, something has gone horribly, horribly wrong. In this, it actually models, modern small ground, small ground combat actions pretty well.
Oh. So this Squadron Strike game takes place in the Traveler universe?
So Traveler has been a catch-all for RPGs and a bunch of, box board games and nearly everything else that they could think of that they could fit under the banner. Squadron Strike is a game engine that I built specifically for doing licenses after my experience with Attack Vector and my experience with doing Saganami Island Tactical Simulator. We
should point out that's from the Honor Harrington universe.
Yes, that is from the Honor Harrington. That is from the Honor Harrington universe.
Okay.
I did the Honor Harrington Space Combat game, and about 2 years ago, for a number of reasons, I separated from my business partners, and they kept the Honor Harrington license, and I kept the other games. So with the way the Traveler works, there were all kinds of games that were set up for doing things in the Traveler universe. And Traveler has always had a dichotomy in spaceship action. On the one side, you have effectively small ship stuff. The Serenity or a Firefly class transport is trying to sneak past the Reavers onto the ground in Miranda. That is the kind of thing you would do in an RPG session. Traveler has also had a background that has had titanic fleets moving across the Imperial space and blowing the crap out of each other. One of the very first board games that Traveler did was the Fifth Frontier War, which was all about fleet actions. One of the things that Traveler did was integrate the ship design system into the algorithm that makes counter strengths for Fifth Frontier War, and then that sort of grew on its own and became High Guard. But for the longest stretch of time, the concept of Traveler spaceship combat, where maneuver actually matters, has kind of gotten a short shrift. I mean, there are space combat games like, say, Starfleet Battles or Babylon 5 Wars and things like that, where a lot of the fun is putting ships on the map, moving them around, and making pew 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 noises as you roll dice. And Traveller has never had a successful game in that niche, and that's the niche that I'm trying to hit now with Squadron Strike Traveller.
Yeah, I'm really surprised actually that nobody has done a like an official D20 engine conversion of the thing, because it was what, a percentage dice based thing.
Actually, there was a D20 version of Traveller. It's called T20. I forgot it in the overview of things out there. I've got a copy of it on my shelf, but it came and it sort of went without much of a trace.
Oh.
Yeah, because the advantage with the D20 thing is that everybody knows how to play a D20 game because we've all done it at some point, right? It just, it clicks, right? So you don't have to really learn an entire system. Because Skyrealms of Jarun, which is my favorite RPG world, not my favorite system, right? So that was kind of the downfall of that game, was that they had a really weird RPG system in there as far as their dice mechanics and everything. And it would have worked so well as a D20 game, and unfortunately that license wasn't really wide open back then. So everybody was kind of trying to reinvent the wheel around that. So, but and that's kind of the problem that GURPS tried to solve with Steve Jackson's generic universal role-playing system, was let's just have one streamlined set of rules, and then you grab a supplement that is a different genre and bolt onto it. Like, we'll do GURPS superheroes, or we'll do GURPS, Ninja Turtles, or whatever the heck we want to do. And that way you don't have to relearn the basics. You just learn, the world that you're in. But yeah, Traveller, like you were saying, it's been through iterations of that, and they've tried different engines and stuff, so.
Right. So what I would point out is that Steve Jackson Games' GURPS is one of the very, very few attempts to make a best way to describe it is universal API for role-playing games. And it is very much a product of the time that it was designed in. It is attempting to be a physics simulator. It is the Unreal Engine of role-playing games, is one way to put it. What we've found out since GURPS came out is that a lot of role-playing games need to be less physics simulators and more story generators, story simulators. I like a lot of D20-based systems, but I don't think that smashing everything down into D20 class plus level, class plus race plus level, is a particularly great way to do every kind of role-playing game under the sun. Because one of the things that made Traveller really unique in classic Traveller was that you were rolling your character up through his various stints and what he was doing before he became an adventurer. And in addition to the fact that he could die before you got to character creation, the other thing that you got out of it was that was pretty much the only skills that you got. Once your character popped out of character generation, you weren't going to be getting any additional skills. You weren't going to be getting any additional boosts. The reward of the play wasn't leveling up and getting new cool abilities or cool new toys. The reward of the play was the play itself. And that's something that D20 systems really don't handle that well.
Right, because it was kind of Star Trek in that, okay, the doctor is the doctor, and he's not going to become the weapons technician as well. It's just like you're in this role now because that's, who you were through your military career or however you got to where you're going. But when you talk about like the whole story generation thing, that has been a problem with me and sci-fi games for a long, long time, is they give you like this elaborate, like, here's the rules system, here's all this cool equipment, like here's our guns and our scanners and how our shields work and all this stuff, right? We've built this world, but we don't tell you what to do in it, so it's just like, oh, well, yeah, you guys all meet at a bar. Yeah. Right. But like, what's our reference? So we got Star Trek, Star Wars, all that wonderful, terrible sci-fi in the 80s.
And just to put a point of reference, in Star Wars, the adventuring party begins when two of the cohort NPCs are looking for the mentor NPC who meets up with the other half of the party. Who meets up with the other half of the party in a bar.
Wait, what?
Well, I'm speechless. No.
Yeah,
he's saying, the trope,
Luke and
like,
Ben
you guys all
meet
met
Han
in a
Solo.
bar.
Yeah, Luke and Ben meet Han Solo and Chewie in the Mos Eisley Cantina. You all met in a bar.
Now let's go on an adventure.
Jesus Christ, my mind just blew up. What?
That's why Ken makes the big bucks. Is because he's got the insight.
That is, like... Look, I always thought of Star Wars as a fantasy, in my opinion. Like, I really have, but that just puts the icing on the cake of that theory for me. Like, that's...
Well, it's like King Arthur mixed with the Kurosawa movie, and you're good, right? So it's a samurai flick and sort of an Arthurian legend, right? Because he pulled the lightsaber out of the stone, and he's the chosen one. Yeah.
What? Okay.
What? The Boy King. Yeah.
Oh God, the Boy King. Oh God, that's crazy. Yeah, my mind is kind of blown.
But it's the thing, talking about tropes of fantasy and science fiction and stuff, right? Because there's only so many stories that humanity tells, and it's like we're gonna tell, something. It's basically like cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, princesses and dragons. Something. Somebody's got a problem. We're gonna go solve it. Right. And and in some high adventure thing. So the stuff. How do they set that up in Traveler? And did they ever get to the point of saying, okay, here's the world, here's what's going on, here's your place in it, and these are things that you could go do? Because so many games are just like, yeah, here's all this equipment and source material, but we didn't flesh out a world, and there's so many planets, right? Like every planet, well, like Star Wars, perfect example. Every planet is one type of thing, right? It's an ocean planet, it's a desert planet, it's an ice planet. And you look at Earth and we have, billions of people here, so much diversity, multiple cultures. We don't even have aliens here. Well, not that we admit, but it's just like you drive far enough in one direction, you're going to meet people that are effectively aliens. So I can only imagine on an interstellar scale where we had, 1,000 planets, and how humanity alone would diversify, even without weird aliens, and how those people would get along, right? Like the countries in Europe can't even get along with each other. What happens when you extrapolate that out into different stars, right? But then science fiction has always been about, let's take a real world situation and abstract that into a science fiction setting, because we can strip away all the foundational stuff that is background noise and influences. You think about surrounding things when we talk about Europe, and they have history and whatnot. But if I just wanted to talk about, like the Roman Empire, the rise and fall of, well, let's put the Roman Empire in space, and then we don't have to deal with all that history stuff, and I can focus you on, let's look at this aspect of the story, right? And that's a thing that I have not really gotten from the sci-fi RPG stuff, was the, here's your setting where you're at.
So one of the things that has happened in role-playing game design and the communities that grow up around role-playing games is that in the last, I would say 5 to 7 years, it started out with something called the old school revolution, which is people who love original old school D&D, not AD&D, but first edition box set D&D, and people who are trying to recreate those tropes.
So like the over basic adventure, right? Are you familiar with that, or basic RPG or whatever it's called? It's a freeware open source D&D.
Yeah, there are about 30 different remixes and rehashes of D&D out there, at least 30 that I can think of. And there are probably more. It's not really my role-playing game scene. But one of the things that they do is that you make the adventure off of things the characters say. So loading up a lot of setting at the beginning tends to actually not be a good way to run an RPG. And one of the things that changed from when Traveller came out in the 1970s and now is Star Wars. Traveller predates Star Wars. Traveller predates Star Wars by a couple of years. Traveller assumed that everybody who was playing it had heard of or read books by Andre Norton or several other people that are listed in the literary references.
And actually, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, when they were in college, ran a Traveller campaign. And no, I'm kidding.
What?
No, I'm pretty sure that isn't the case. But there is an urban myth that I mentioned before about Tim Minear and Joss Whedon. Anyway, but one of the things that's happened is that with the idea that a game must come with a package setting, or that a game is tailored to a specific setting, there's been a bit of a counterculture movement to that in role-playing game designs, where one of the things that you try to do is you try to encourage the GMs to improvise based on what the characters are doing. You come up with an outline of what the NPCs are doing, and you listen to what the players are saying, and whatever the players are saying is what you gradually nudge the NPCs into doing, because that way the players are more engaged. This is an interactive medium for role-playing games. And that being said, the product that I'm doing is actually more of a miniatures game than a role-playing game.
But will it actually tie in to, if I'm doing a role-playing thing and then I want to put my characters on a ship, then we break your game out? And because with Star Frontiers back in the day, they came out with a box set. It was called Nighthawks, and that was their tabletop board game spaceship combat thing, but it was based in the role playing. And
right now, the current product that I'm doing will not do that. The smallest ship that I deal with in my product is the 1,000-ton Fer de Lance destroyer escort. The biggest ship that a player character is ever likely to have as their own set of resources is about 600 tons. A future product that I want to do is going to be along those lines, but I'm very much on the big ships end of the Traveller spectrum. And I also have some design problems with the idea that all the player characters get into their spaceship, and the player characters make the skill rolls for the weapons, the sensor operators, the I'm giving her all she's got, Captain, rolls for the engineer, while the GM is playing a bunch of spaceships out there. Because when you think about it, what the end result of that is, well, kind of lackluster. Because you know that the GM, if he is playing better than the player characters are, well, oh gee, he just put a big hole through the reactor core of the spaceship, and the campaign just ended.
Yeah, they talk about your party wipe, right?
Yeah. Oh gee, he just blew off the front half of the spaceship, and the campaign ends. It kind of ruins the fun of taking out the miniatures and playing a miniatures game if you know that the other guy can't afford to let you lose.
Right, or the stakes are too high at that point.
It's not even that the stakes are too high. It's that it's a case of what the player characters will want out of a space scene is very different from what you get out of a miniatures game. What the player characters want is, hi, we're going to do something clever and pull a high gravity maneuver. We're going to pull a high gravity Oberth effect thrust and slip away from this Gazelle fiery escort using hand wavy double talk that sounds vaguely scientific. And that is much better as describe the outcome that you're going to do. Describe the outcome that you want, roll some dice, and if you succeed, what you described is what happens. If you get a partial success, you get what happens, and you have some negative consequences, i.e. we swung through that high-gravity maneuver, and now we have to do some engine repairs real soon here because, well, something shook loose, and we need to put her down someplace.
Or you could be Starfleet battles where the rulebook collection is sufficient that scenario is probably somewhere. Right, and then you'll have a fight at the table about who's got what book, and oh no, it's on this page. Yeah, I've played some Starfleet battles. It gets ugly.
I've played a lot of Starfleet battles. At one point, I was probably in the top 20 players in the country at it, and did a fair bit of development work for it. I was the marketing director that came out with that was in charge when Federation Commander got launched. So,
oh, cool. Yeah, I like Federation Commander a lot.
Wow,
so
this guy right here.
I know,
yeah,
right?
So no dissing on SFB, man.
So, Klingons?
I like Klingons. I also like the Andromedans.
So you're like the Westman of board games.
Yes.
Only when they deal with spaceships, basically.
So what we need to do is get Jack Campbell on the phone right now, and we'll get you that license, and that can happen. So, have you read the Lost Fleet stuff?
I have indeed, and I've even actually talked to Jack Campbell on Facebook, we were actually looking seriously about meeting up at the con I was at last weekend, but he had some family issues that came up.
He's also had some health issues, the poor guy.
He has.
Yeah, he's got a detached retina right now, which is...
Yeah. That sounds horrible.
It's an end to his boxing career, that's for sure.
It definitely is an end to his boxing career.
Anyway. That would be amazing, though, if it could make some kind of Lost Fleet tie-in. Oh, my God. I would buy everything related to that.
Well, let me go back to the RPG question,
Okay.
because the thing I get asked a lot, and you guys were far from the first, was how do I use Squadron Strike Traveler to help my player characters in their Traveler game? And the short answer is you don't. You use Squadron Strike Traveler to play fleet actions in the Traveler universe. What would you want? What features? What kind of movie scenes? What features would you want to play? Would you want to see in doing an RPG style adventure with spaceships?
That's true. That's what this does.
So Squadron Strike being sort of an open API into, take any space license, grab it, stick it in here. So let's talk about the big two, Star Trek, Star Wars, right? So because this is actually a vector-based mechanic, so at that point, X-Wings and TIE Fighters start obeying actual physics. How do you work that? Because I know you have a cinematic mode in there, but you're still kind of using a lot of the toolkit from the vector stuff.
So what I did with Squadron Strike was I set it up so that it has different movement modes. And the movement modes are named after the number of Newton's laws being obeyed. Mode 0, your ship moves like an ox cart. You turn off your engines and your ship quickly grinds to a halt.
Oh, Starfleet battles.
Yep. Or anime movies, or anime basically. Where, oh my gosh, the engine is broken and we are stuck until we get it fixed. Mode 1 movement, your ship has momentum, but it magically rotates in the direction the front of the ship is pointed in. And as you turn, you bleed speed off. That is physics the way that George Lucas meant it to be, or a Lucasian model of physics. Mode 2, you have vectors that are independent of the facings of your ship, and if you build up a vector of 8 hexes per turn in one direction, in order to cancel it out, you've got to swing your nose around 180 degrees and apply 8 units of thrust in the opposite direction to cancel it out.
I just want to point out that I'm going to get a T-shirt that says Lucasian physics on it.
Well, it's even...
I think did you just coin that term on our show? Are we famous now?
You might be famous, but I've been using it in demos for quite some time. What's even more funny is that Isaac Newton was the Lucasian chair of physics, Lucasian chair of mathematics at the university that he was faculty of.
That's really a thing.
That really is a thing.
Wow. Oh, so there's actually Lucasian physics, not just like George physics. That's
Well, yeah, but then he has to come back in 20 years and change it, right? And it's like, it's like new math.
Right, or element 115 is Disnium, and that's what they actually run on.
Common warp.
That's why they never need to fuel up, because they're running on Disnium.
Common warp core type math.
Oh,
sorry. That was
That's
terrible.
such a dad joke of you, Brian. Stop it.
Correction. Newton was a fellow at Trinity College and the second Lucasian professor of mathematics at the University of Cambridge.
Wait, what?
Lucasian. I've never heard of this.
Yeah.
Well, when I started talking about Lucasian physics for George Lucas style movement, I was unaware that Newton was the Lucasian professor of mathematics, but it was too much of a coincidence not to carry on.
So I can visualize, like, you're giving this talk and some really beardy guy that's got a Starfleet battles manual in his lap stands up and goes, actually.
It's about ethics in war. It's
No.
about ethics in war
Oh
games.
God.
Sorry,
No, it's just
I'm
I've
sorry.
been to a lot of cons. I know.
Oh, the best was side.
Well-
Oh, go ahead.
One of the things about having worked with Starfleet Battles for 20 years is that most of the SFB guys will actually, give me mad props because, I wrote a fair number of the rules for Starfleet Battles.
Oh.
And also because, I was there for the launch of Federation Commander, and that really reinvigorated the Starfleet Battles, Starfleet Universe community.
So we need to get Ken to come back for our Starfleet Command episode when we play Orion Pirates.
That's
yeah.
that's in 2 weeks, I think. It's next week, not this week.
Yeah, and you saw that, right? The Taldrin game.
I have. I know of the Taldrin game. I have never actually played it.
Oh, they're excellent. If
We
you
can
know,
change your life.
If they're excellent, if you can it's Star Trek, so things are abstracted.
Yeah, it's basically Starfleet battles in real time, with.
Well, I'm
your
familiar with. I'm familiar with them. I've
Yeah.
edited. I've done editing on Captain's Log, so I've read the articles that came out because of them. But I've never actually played them. In part because when they came out, my poor little cheap computer wasn't capable of running them. And since then, because I look at how much time I have available for all the projects that I have, and I go, oh yeah, I need a time sync computer game that will suck 20 hours out of my life like I need a hole in my head.
So, well, since you bring up computer games and we're talking about that, and then we're also talking about Federation Commander and stuff. So Starfleet Battles, Federation Commander, and that. So if you go to their website, they have a subscription service on there where you can actually play Starfleet Battles and Fed Commander online with other people. I think it's like $3 a month or something. Yeah.
Yes, Starfleet Battles Online.
Unfortunately, it's not really good looking, but it's functional.
It is functional and is done entirely with the Swing user interface in Java, and I was the very first paying customer for them, and knew the developers of and know the developers of all four versions of it, all four iterations of it pretty well. I mean, the Starfleet Battles community is fairly tight knit, and we all knew each other. So the very first version of Starfleet Battles Online was, for all intents and purposes, a hack of the IRC poker program.
Wait, what?
The IRC poker program. You would actually you would log on to IRC, and IRC would handle a deck of cards, and you could play poker with a bunch of other people in IRC.
Really?
Yeah, and then they adapted it into let's play Starfleet instead. It's a bot, right, that sits in the channel.
This Federation Commander thing looks pretty neat. So it's a role-playing game and a card game.
No, that's the Starfleet universe. The Starfleet universe bears the Starfleet universe is made up of several games. The same with the Traveler universe is made up of several games.
Oh.
Federation Commander is one of the games in the Starfleet universe.
Oh, I see.
Federation Commander is basically like a reboot of Starfleet Battles, but they said, okay, let's take these million rules that are all exceptions to exceptions, and let's just streamline that and get it back to something that you can play with a book that's under 100 pages.
I like how they have one called Starmada. That's hilarious. But yeah, they've got
Starmada is based off of is the Starfleet universe adaptation of the Starmada game engine, which was written by a friend of mine by the name of Dan Cast, and it is an interesting take on the universe. It moves quickly, and ships are basically teeny tiny little things, and it's good for running lots of ships at once, which if you played Starfleet Battles, is not the way to run with Starfleet Battles.
Yeah, definitely not. I want a computer version of Federation and Empire so that I can finally play that game with somebody. That's what I want.
If you want to play Federation and Empire, you want to go to StratCon, which is a convention put on by the Federation and Empire fans specifically to play Federation and Empire.
Oh wow!
Wait. So this game looks pretty epic. This Federation and Empire game, but people made a convention just for this game.
Yes.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Because it's powerful.
That's amazing. How much is this stuff?
No, because the Star Trek people are hardcore, man. It's like they just let Star
Yeah.
Wars exist.
Holy shit!
It's if you think about it too, like those Star Trek folks are the same ones that are like keeping Star Trek Online alive. Like I guarantee you that.
Yeah, it's a good thing Ken didn't get the Axonar license because.
Oh no. No,
Yeah.
Federation and Empire is expensive. Just the base game is just the base edition is $70, and that's without all these other these $30 and $40 and $50 supplements.
Yeah, but that's about the same Fantasy Flight pricing model too. All right, so.
And I will also point out that unlike, say, indie computer games, those of us in the board game hobby actually like to be able to eat, more than once a week, and so we actually price our products in ways that are sustainable business models for us. I am amazed at the amount of time and effort that obviously goes into making an indie game that that somebody sells for $10 on Steam, and then 6 months later it's down to $5 on Steam, simply because, well, that's what everybody else is pricing theirs at.
Yeah, well, there's a wickedness to the market, but there's also like how many units get moved, right? Because it's like you don't like drop 30,000 units on the first day either whenever you bring a game out, right? So I guess, and plus you have the cost of physical production in there too.
Yes. As my official biography says, I bring 3D acceleration to tabletop gaming, and I actually have a user interface made out of actual atoms.
Yeah, I was. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, explain a little bit about the tabletop board game business model, right? Because you have to. You're self-publishing, right? So, but because you're self-publishing, you also have to self-fund everything, and so you have your initial production run, and you have to like have capital and invest in like a printer and boxing it and shipping it and all that mess, and then you hope you get paid, right? So there's a lot of faith that goes on there in the customer.
Well, I have an advantage in that I have an audience that I built up for 13 years on this. But that being said, the general rule of thumb is that if I'm putting a product up on my website, the MSRP that I'm asking for it is about 6 times to 7 times my production cost. So if a boxed game if a boxed game is selling for $70, it costs me $10 a copy to put it in. And yes, it takes some initial capital to set it up, but now that there are Kickstarters out there, it's actually pretty easy for me to raise that capital. Speaking of Kickstarters, I just got notice that
Whoa.
What? Are you there?
Ken?
Oh, sorry. Push to talk. I just found out that Squadron Strike Traveler is listed as one of the projects that we love on Kickstarter now.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Yeah, it looks like you just passed $7,000, which is well above your goal, which is great.
I know, the show's only been on for a half hour. I think we'll do it another half hour.
I know.
It'll be...
Now, I wanted to ask you something because I don't know much about the board games and role-playing games and stuff. All I do, my thing is, I've got several role-playing games that I love, and I love having the books. Well, a lot of them looks like you can only get on PDFs. So have PDFs like changed your business model at all? Like, is it easier to get the games to people? Like, are they more willing to not have a physical copy now? They're more willing to have a PDF?
PDFs have opened up international sales for me considerably.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Because, quite honestly, even if it were Donald Trump, I would probably vote and campaign for any president that said that his first executive order would be to mandate the return of surface mail to the U.S. Postal Service. I would seriously consider voting for Trump if he did that.
Oh, Jesus.
Because FedEx is putting it to you.
Okay, so up until 2010, you were able to send things by surface mail. And a boxed game could be sent with about $20 to $25 in shipping, and it would take 4 to 6 weeks to get there. Now, if I want to send a box to Europe, I have to charge my customer about $55-$60 in shipping costs.
Oh my god!
Holy crap!
Yeah.
So do you get like bulk discount? You know, at some
Nope.
point you. Ooh. And then you get tariffs on top of that, or that.
And the customer
includes...
ends up paying tariffs on top of that. So my customers who are overseas are really dedicated to these games.
Yeah, no doubt. So do you have a lot of Germany fan base? Because that seems to be like where the big tabletop stuff goes down.
I've got a fair number of customers in Germany and France, a larger chunk in the UK, a large chunk in Australia, and a growing group in Ukraine, of all places.
Oh, cool.
Huh.
We've seen a lot of the space game development stuff migrate over, because we had a dead period in space games on PC at least, where it was like the early 2000s, and it was like just a boom market, and then suddenly crickets. Like, where did it go? And I think it was basically like all the venture capital fled the room, because it's like, whoa, StarCraft, right? So okay, now we're gonna do nothing but RTS and first-person shooters, and nobody wants to buy a joystick anymore, and we're done with that. So it's kind of been us watching, because we started doing this show, and we were just like, yeah, we're gonna kind of reminisce about the old dead thing, and then suddenly it came surging back to life. You're welcome. And I don't think it was us, but anyway, so the scope of things changed, because suddenly it's like everybody's doing one, and we've got a full guest list, and it's crazy town. So we were not expecting that at all.
No.
But it's so in the lull there, the only people that were making these games was like Eastern European.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because the production costs were so low, because they just weren't getting paid a lot, so they could afford to do it. And of course now it's shifting back, but those people that were over there that are still doing that, now they have access to the boom economy of it, so they're making higher and higher quality products too. Because it used to be, for a while there, it was like, oh yeah, weird Eastern European game where they don't understand user interface design and things like that, and so some of that stuff was really rough.
User interface design approved by party proletariat. You will like it. Happiness is mandatory.
In Soviet Russia, interface uses you.
I was gonna say, in Soviet Russia, game plays you.
Why are we making game in space? Because we cannot afford pixels for terrain.
True story.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Honestly, yes, probably so. Because assets, right? Like you gotta model the ground in those little buildings and stuff, or we put it in space. Hey, there's a planet. All right, we're done here.
Yes.
I really like space games, but it lacks atmosphere.
Oh.
Wow. All right, Dad.
There was that one space game that had planned stuff from Russia, the Tomorrow War. That game was crazy.
Yeah,
and not that great.
Right. That's exactly symptomatic of the disease I was talking about. So, but yet has so much promise. If it was just playable.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'd started asking about, and you were talking about like the number of Newtonian rules that are obeyed, and that's the movement system that you have. So you can go from full on, let's do vector math, right? And I like how you have simplified that, and it's a thing like I keep, so you got like 30-degree increments, right? So you just basically pre-bake the math on a table, and it's like, well, we only have to calculate 30-degree increments. So now it's actually
it's
doable.
only 60-degree increments.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. I thought it was 30s because you used.
You can still face in 30-degree increments, but what happens is the vectors get split between two 60-degree facings, and the 60-degree facings mean the vector math is really straightforward.
Yeah. So speaking of math, I noticed that you have some books on your website that are actually math and how to do it. like your orbital mechanics and such for gameplay.
Yes, as a matter of fact, do.
Really?
One of the 2 ebooks. They're available as a bundle that gives you both of them. One of them was the one that I was up for a Hugo Award last year. The other one is the sequel to it that I just put out earlier this month.
So would you say that this is applicable to, like, say, computer guy that's out there listening and is like, I want to make a space game, but I don't understand how to calculate orbital stuff or vectors or any of that?
No,
is that their guide?
This is not the orbital mechanics textbook that you want. This is, however, a good guideline for if you're a fiction writer or running an RPG for figuring out how long it will take to get from point A to point B, or what the hazards are of actually traveling in space.
Oh, cool.
These are popular science treatments, not the I'm going to teach you all the math you need to work at NASA.
Well, that's disappointing because I was getting my resume together. I was one book away from it, I thought. Yeah, they had, 18,000 applicants.
Oh, right. And they're probably only
Yeah.
going to accept, 3.
Yeah, they said something about you had to go to college, so that kind of ruled me out. But, well, I meant finish college. Everybody went, but nobody. But anyway.
I didn't notice these.
Back to so one of the other things that's out there is that you'll notice that there are 3 Newton's laws. There are 3 of them, and in Squadron Strike we go 0, 1, and 2. If you actually want mode 3 movement, you play attack vector, and in some ways, because the difference in attack vector, we actually track fuel, and as you burn fuel, your ship gets lighter. As your ship gets lighter, its maximum thrust increases, and we actually have that apply in game.
Wow, so that's like basic rocket equation stuff, then, but applied to a board game. So that's pretty cool.
It is.
So do I need a science degree to play this game?
No, you'll get a science degree playing the game. That's the key. See, he slips you.
It's a course in. Gotcha. Nice. Okay.
It's sort of a stealth education. It's like Kerbal Space Program. You're having fun dicking around, and you don't realize that you're actually learning, and then suddenly.
You're sitting there going, well, gee, I just marked off that last circle on the fuel track. Now they're squares. What does that? Oh, yes, that means the rocket is moving. That means the rocket has a higher thrust rating. That's pretty much what it is. I did terrifying amounts of math to give you a user interface that is circles and squares.
Apparently, yeah, and Jim, you and Hunter apparently saw this game in action, the attack vector one. You apparently saw it in action at that convention you went to. You were talking about.
Yeah, we saw them there was a lot of
setting up.
Of
they were
them setting up. Yeah.
Oh.
They had kind of started one turn and. Yeah.
How long does a game like this take? And how many people do you need? Is it just 2? Can it be just 2 players? Do you need 2?
Attack vector is at its best as 1 to 2 players per 1 to 2 ships per player, and the game mechanics are set up to be simultaneous, so it handles multiple players decently well. Attack vector, the first couple of turns are going to go slow because you're just learning all the rules. Once you're actually familiar with the game, turns take about 15 to 20 minutes, and that's for a full 8-segment turn. And a complete game can be done in about 10 to 15 turns.
So what are the ranges that you're fighting at here, and the speeds? You're not clearly at relativistic speeds, right?
So, we're not even close to relativistic speeds. In attack vector, 1 hex is 20 kilometers, and 1 turn is 128 seconds of real-time movement. And the speeds, a speed of 1 is roughly jetliner speed. A speed of 2 is roughly Mach 1 in equivalent, Mach 1 at sea level. And most closing passes are done with combined vectors that average out to about 10 to 20 hexes per turn.
Wow, that's pretty great. I was told.
So what does that translate to in kilometers a second closure?
Kilometers per second of closure, 156 meters. I'm doing some math in my head. That will peak out at about 4 kilometers, at about 4 to 6 kilometers per second.
Okay, yeah, because I was helping somebody that's working on a Starfighter game that they're doing, and he had quoted something 10 kilometers a second, and I thought, okay, if you take the mass of an F-15 and you strap the engines on it that produce the thrust of the space shuttle, because both of those are documented figures. And it's like, if you're going 10 kilometers a second, you have about 40 minutes to turn around and come back to where you were. So maybe not do that. It's a little too fast. But the other stuff in there, like weapon engagement range. So do you have like, how do you deal with, like, okay, I'm shooting lasers, right? Do lasers lose accuracy? Do they lose penetration over distance? Because it's not really that great at distance, right? Or is it a focal problem? Push the talk key.
About that, what happens with lasers in Attack Vector is that you have a weapon table that looks a lot like a Starfleet Battles phaser table. You cross-reference the range, you roll a die, and that tells you how good your shot was. And pretty much lasers never miss, but you can have focal effects and such be that you're not actually doing any significant damage past the armor of the target either.
Okay. And you're actually modeling armor in facets, right? So it depends on what aspect I hit you at. Did I tear the armor off or not?
Actually, it's more like hitting it with an ice pick. We're assuming that the armor is a very high-tech composite, metal matrix composite, and for lasers we're dealing more with energy of ablation rather than kinetic shock or anything like that.
Okay, but if I hit you with missiles, do I actually ablate your armor?
If you hit with nukes, you ablate the armor.
Okay.
If you hit with missiles, the missiles are assumed to be long rod penetrators. And they will just basically plow through the ship and do horrifying things. The fun thing about kinetic weapons when you do them is that Attack Vector actually has a model for kinetic weapons that takes your vectors, the vectors of your target ship, the vectors of your launch mechanism, combines all of them, and turns them into a firing solution, including telling you if you have it'll tell you if you do or do not have a shot pretty early on. And if you do have a shot, you fill out a card, you hand it to your opponent, and now it's his problem. He knows when they're going to arrive. He knows how much thrust he has to put lateral to their course to avoid them. And it results in a very interesting set of tactical interplays, because you might have a set of kinetic weapons that are only, say, doing 12 or 13 points of damage, which his front armor will take just fine. But if he turns... but if he turns to apply thrust laterally to them, well, suddenly those become actual threats, because his side armor might only have, a value of 3.
But the bullets aren't going to track, right? So if I know that they're going to arrive at a certain hex, because I'm headed in one direction.
Oh
so
no,
I know that
the bullets are actually tracking. They have some ability to cancel lateral thrust, because if you don't, they just never hit.
Right, and that's what I was wondering is like, okay, you fire a shot, it takes time to get to me. I have plenty of time to get out of the way. Just don't be in that hex, and I'd be fine. So yeah, you have to have some way for them to adjust.
It's actually less about don't be in that hex and more build up a vector perpendicular to the axis that these are closing on. If you think of it in terms of don't be in that hex, you are setting yourself up for a very ugly experience when somebody actually figures out that's what you're doing and smashes kinetics into you.
Yeah. So, does it take into account like rate of closure? Like if we're static at a certain distance,
yes,
then I have a velocity. But if we're headed toward each other, at 4 kilometers, then that gets added into the kinetic impact of the weapon, or what?
It is indeed, and in fact, the metric for how fast the metric for how fast the kinetic weapon is impacting at is called rate of closure.
Okay, and that's handled as what, like a multiplier on top of, or what?
Nope. Basically, what happens is you cross-reference the rate of closure with the mass of the shell when you fill out the card, and that tells you how much damage the shell will do. Then you fill it out on the card, you hand it to your opponent, and he knows how fast it's closing in on him, and he knows when it will hit and how much ouch it has.
So it sounds like you have a lot of detail going on here, yet a sufficient amount of hand wavium that it's manageable. So, yeah, I like that. It's like I've had Attack Vector forever, and just never been able to play it with anybody because, well, Hunter lives like 3 hours away and Brian's a whole coast away, and I have no friends. But that's the thing. Why I keep lobbying, like, please, make an online version so people can enjoy this thing. Because it's tough. Because it's like to find a game that's as common as like Starfleet battles, but then you take something that's niche like this and try to find somebody local that's into it, and that's a much tougher proposition. So aside from like convention gatherings and stuff, it's tough.
You know what could happen with this though, and not necessarily like full on developed online version, but what could happen is you take something like what the great people over at Roll20 have done, right? Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but I've used it, and I know quite a few of my friends who use it who live in different parts of the country. And you could actually develop this as like just a thing that you can use in Roll20, and essentially all that is importing image files and JPEGs of the boards and of the tokens, aka the ship models, and where they would be, and then
so
you can have
like
all those.
Tabletop Simulator in that aspect,
right? But the thing about Tabletop Simulator is it's also like a 3D generated thing. As where with Roll20 is it's simply to mimic pen and paper type stuff, or using, instead of actually using 3D models, you're using 2D tokens that get placed on the map instead.
Yeah, so it doesn't overcomplicate it.
And it's that instead of using 3D models, you're using 2D tokens is the reason why I don't try, or rather, is the reason why all of the two previous attempts to get Roll20 to work with Attack Vector and Squadron Strike have failed.
Really? Why is that?
Yeah.
Because
okay, so you say you've seen the game with the little tilt blocks and the box miniatures out in play, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so those convey, along with the tiles underneath them, those convey altitude and orientation. And that is really hard to show with a fixed perspective, top-down camera view of the map. Unless
though, because you can add specific tickers to tokens too to indicate. You say this ticker indicates its altitude. This ticker indicates its like distance to whatever. And
yeah, I mean, you can work around it, but still,
you could work around it, but the end result is something that you're going to spend
more frustrating.
The end result is going to be more frustrating than actually playing it in person.
Gotcha.
So what we need here is we need the guys over at Nordic Games to bring the Nexus the Jupiter incident engine, and then we've got it.
So what I actually have planned is about a year ago I did a Kickstarter for the Avid Assistant, which is a tablet-based app that does everything that the Avid, the Attitude Vector Information Display, does for running a game in Squadron Strike and Attack Vector. Development on that has been slow because the person who was doing the coding suddenly got a job that paid him a living salary.
Hey, that happens.
So the fact that I was paying him enough to keep the lights on and keep the wife and kid in rice and beans, he still wants to do this. He's still working hard on it, but it's now I'm doing this in my evenings rather than I'm doing this for 6 hours a day every day. But that is phase one. Phase two is a tool that would use. Phase two is a plan to use a tool like near field communication, or logging into a server somewhere to have the program roll damage and do damage allocation to to ships stored on other people's tablets. And phase three is basically using a Unity engine for doing a 3D representation of a map. But what I intend to do is build a series. Is instead of trying to do this as a monolithic development, my intention is to do this in a way where we build it up slowly, one step at a time, and each thing that I build adds functionality to playing the game in person with tablets and in a game store, so that at the end, when I actually go and do the virtual stuff, I don't slit my own throat and get rid of the in-person play community.
Well, yeah, because that's kind of the danger zone there, right? Is like, I don't want to make a product that obsoletes my actual product.
It's not even obsoletes my actual product. It's that, I was part of the first wave of people who were using Starfleet Battles Online, and at the same time that it was going on, I was one of the people who was doing a lot of playtesting for Starfleet Battles. And I had a battle lab that had 20-ish odd people who would show up. Not all 20 would show up on every single game night, but over the course of a month, we'd see everybody. And some people liked playing scenarios, some people liked playtesting scenarios, some people liked doing tournament stuff. When Starfleet Battles Online came out, all the people who just did tournament stuff and suffered through the playtesting to have a play group, they stayed home and played tournament games. Yeah. And suddenly my minimum viable group took a hit. And people got older, they had kids, they got wives, they got mortgages, they moved away, and it became it became harder and harder to get everything running. One of the things that I really want to push is for people to actually go and play these games in stores, because that is an important part of marketing for me. It's great if you buy the product. I love it if you buy the product. It is even more important that you assemble your box miniatures, that you play through the tutorial, that you understand the game, and that you go on out to game stores with a buddy and you play there and you talk to people as they come by and say, "Hey, what's that? That's neat. Oh, wow, you're actually playing that in 3D? Okay, I got to watch this and see what's going on." That's an important part of my marketing plan.
Mm. Yeah, because really the only other space game that's in the market right now that's actually got any traction is, there's two. But it's both the Fantasy Flights, the Star Wars properties that they've got. But it's, an online version of that's not going to happen either, right? Because that's basically their money is selling the miniatures for that thing, which yours is the base game, right? So I know you guys have miniatures, but that doesn't seem to be a focal.
No, the miniatures are definitely optional. I'm in the process of developing a better three-dimensional miniatures-based system. And we will see how that actually turns out, assuming that the engineers ever actually get back to me.
Yeah, that the miniatures thing, what I've seen, pictures online of, is like a pretty wild, like cam looking. It's almost like gear stuff to hold the angle, and it's like a strange crane game thing. It's cool.
That's about right.
It's like the only way to solve that problem, right? But other than have like a ball, I guess. If you had a spherical metal ball, and then the ship had a magnet on a stick coming out the bottom, and then you could just slide it around the ball, that might work. But other than that, yeah, if you're gonna have a flat, stable thing, then having some sort of an armature is about the only way to do it.
Yep. We've got some interesting diagrams put up, and
I've seen people use those for Starfleet too. It looks pretty wild.
Yep. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
To kind of give you guys an idea of when he's talking about the Avid, if you think about it, it's not quite like this, but if you think about like a soccer ball, right? How it's got the facets on it, and if you cut a soccer ball in half, so you have a dome, and you set that over top of your ship, and then you say, okay, I'm going to turn the ship to point through that facet of the ball, and that means that my course is going to be such. So and you basically you plot that on paper where you say, okay, my nose is here, and I'm going to drag the nose over to there, and then I look at the change in orientation and how much thrust, and you look it up on the table, and then you find out where you actually ended up through adding your current course and then the course that you're making the adjustment, and you end up with the middle of that.
Yep. That is one way to describe the Avid. It's actually really hard to describe the Avid with just verbals when you can't actually see it.
I did just put a still image of an example GIF up on the stream for people to see.
Yeah, and knowing about your involvement now with Starfleet, that explains a lot about the ship reference stuff in this too, because that's like the only comparison that I could make is kind of how the Starfleet ships had that complicated layout of squares on the thing. Because that's a deal, right? You can blow off components. It's not like, oh, my ship has X number of hit points. You can actually knock systems off.
Yes, that is one of the things that is a differentiator. This is one of the places where there's a continuum of interesting design choices.
Right.
Sorry about the pause there. Didn't want to cough in your listeners' ears.
Appreciate it.
One of the design choices is: do you allow different facings of the ship to have different defenses? Starfleet, Starmada does not. all of the ship's facings basically have the same defenses in Starmada. Starfleet Battles, you have 6 facings that correspond to the 6 faces of the hex grid. Squadron Strike, you have 6 facings that correspond to nose, left, right, top, bottom, and aft. Some games like Full Thrust and the new version of Starmada say that once you get past a certain number of boxes marked on the ship, you basically make saving throws for each system that's on the for each system that it actually does damage or does something useful in the game. Others like Squadron Strike, as you mark off boxes in the course of damage allocation, you lose capabilities as you go along. This is also the Starfleet Battles model.
Yeah, is that kind of also the way that Fed Commander does it, where you trace a path through the ship, and it's like if this thing's missing, then the shot's going to continue on to the next thing that it would hit.
Not quite that way for Fed Commander, but Fed Commander and Starfleet Battles have a fixed static damage allocation table or damage allocation chart. You roll 1, you mark off things 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and if you don't have something of that particular box, you check the alternative option. If you don't have that, you move on to the next thing down. And in Squadron Strike, the damage allocation system is very different from Federation Commander. In Squadron Strike, a ship sheet is set up in such a way that there are 10 hit locations. You mark off a damage box. You use enough damage to mark off 1 box, then move to the next group of boxes, mark off 1 box, move to the next group of boxes, mark off 1 box, and so on and so forth. The goal on the Squadron Strike damage allocation system was to make it so that it was interactive with the players, so that you would roll all 4 of the dice you need to make an attack, and in about the time you've gathered your dice up, he's already marked off the damage, and you're ready to go for the next shot. It actually makes the game go back and forth a little bit more interactively, and it speeds the game up.
So the bulk of your time is probably just in the movement aspect, right?
In a typical game of Squadron Strike, for people who are fluid with the game, movement is actually, first of all, Squadron Strike, 1 turn takes between 6 and 10 minutes. It's about double the speed of the game of Attack Vector because you have fewer variables to deal with. The situations where it's a 10-minute turn or where there's lots of damage allocation flying, the situations where it's 6 minutes a turn are situations where you're just moving straight forward and you don't need to worry. Your movement options are fairly easy to see and fairly straightforward, and you don't have to worry about dodging torpedoes or something like that.
So how does your do you ship actually in the base game with the starship construction stuff there? It's kind of like for whatever genre, whatever property you're pulling in, here's the conversion.
So what I do with Squadron Strike is that when you register your game, you get the download link for the ship design spreadsheet and the tool chain that I use for producing the SSDs that you saw in the samples that I sent you. Everything in Squadron Strike Traveler is using a subset of some of the stuff that's in basic Squadron Strike. So once you have Traveler ships to work, once you've actually seen the Traveler ships, it's pretty easy to reconstruct them. And when somebody registers their copy of Squadron Strike Traveler, they will get the ship design spreadsheets that we use to make the ships, so they can make their own variants pretty easily. I'm a firm believer in enabling user modifications in Squadron Strike, in letting players actually make the ships that they want to fly. One of the things that I don't do in Attack Vector is expose the ship design system, because quite honestly, if I had to provide end user support for things that involve calculus, I would go and become a garbage man.
You could be a professor, though. You could go to like Attack Vector University and teach online classes.
No, I would get up at 4 a.m. and lift garbage cans into the back of the truck.
Then you'd be like Goodwill Hunting.
Which I still need to see.
Yeah, what would be a fascinating property to deal with in this is David Braben's Elite, because it's smaller ships, but it's still. I mean, I assume you've played Elite at some point, if not the new one, then the old one, or Frontier or whatever, because Frontier had full-on vector, Newtonian physics going on. There was no hand wavium about the flight model, and the problem that caused in a computer game is that people tend to point the nose directly at the target and stomp on the gas. Well, then you get closure rate beyond what you can turn with, and you end up with a jousting match where they just do flybys of each other and, you know, get a laser shot and then they're gone, right? And then you turn around and do it again. And I thought that that's just how the game was, and then I watched a YouTube video of somebody actually playing it right, and it was just like, oh, that's quite elegant when you do it right. You know, maybe if I'd played enough of your board game that I'd understood. But I think that would be very interesting though, because they're smaller ships and they don't deal out as much damage, but they can't take a super beating either. But just that universe, because it's already a bunch of predefined ships and weapons and stuff that you can convert in.
I've got to ask, is that Joan playing GTA in the background?
She is, yes.
I can hear the cops chasing
Have her put some headphones on. God.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's funny because I'm like, you live out in the middle of nowhere. Why the hell are there sirens everywhere? And then I was like, oh, Joan's playing GTA.
Yeah, I got my headphones on. I didn't realize that carried.
No, it's
but anyway,
cool. It's pretty funny.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, we got 4 stars here, man. We got to hurry it up.
So, Ken, what would your advice be to someone maybe like me who's played a ton of computer space games, but pretty much no space board games at all? Like, would this be a game to start with, or would you recommend something else?
Well, gee, hand me an easy question there, why don't you?
Should I play your game, or should I play something else?
Obviously, you should play my game.
Okay, there we go.
I didn't mean to like pimp a competitor or anything. I'm just trying to ask an honest question.
No, I do understand where you're coming from. So, Squadron Strike 2nd Edition came out in December, and Squadron Strike Traveler is based off of Squadron Strike 2nd Edition. Pretty much what's in Squadron Strike 2nd Edition, there are 4 books in the box. One of them is the core rulebook, which is nothing at all setting derived or related. It is entirely about how to play the game. There are 3 other booklets. One of them is a tutorial booklet that teaches the game in stages over 7 scenarios. One of them is a scenario booklet that continues the scenarios from the tutorial and runs out in a complete campaign. The third scenario, the third booklet is an SSD book. It has all of the ships that are available to play.
Oh, okay.
And when I do Squadron Strike Traveler, it's going to have the same. It'll have the same core rulebook as the box set for Squadron Strike, but it'll have a different tutorial book, a different scenario book, and a different SSD book that'll have much beefier SSD counts.
Okay, so if I wanted to like start the easy level with you guys, for example, I would get the Squadron Strike 2nd Edition complete PDF bundle and just read all that. Or if you're really, really cheap, what you do is you buy the Squadron Strike starter kit, which is just the tutorial booklet and just the SSDs that you need to play through the tutorial booklet, and print and play, and print, cut out, and assemble box miniature sheets and origami tilt blocks, so that you can actually just print the things that you need to play. Huh.
So with Attack Vector, you actually put out like a free version that was just the training mission, right? Like, you need this PDF and some chocolate, and you're good to go.
Pretty much. That is the first chapter of the Attack Vector rulebook. And I can always tell when somebody has read the Attack Vector tutorial versus somebody who has played it. Somebody who has played the Attack Vector tutorial, they go, "Oh my God, it's beautiful. It's amazing. It just works. You have to see this. All the math. It's like watching it's like a Swiss watch. It's beautiful. You have to see it." As people are backing away, because, oh my God, this guy's from a cult or something.
So what we need is actually a video.
For somebody who's just read the rules, the response tends to be, tried reading the quote unquote tutorial, got halfway through the second part, heard sound of sizzling bacon, got burns on my shoulder because my brains had been leaking out my ear.
So the advice is, don't read it, just do it, and you'll be fine.
Yes, play the tutorial, don't just read it.
Which is the point of the chocolate, right? You throw some Hershey's Kisses out there, and then you fly the ship, and it's like, okay, if you can hit the chocolate, you can eat the chocolate. And
exactly. There was a fellow in Britain who did a video on Vimeo, going through a good chunk of the attack vector tutorial. I don't know if he ever actually completed that, but he did the first 2 turns.
Well, I think with your Kickstarter, do you have any video up there of the game actually being played where you kind of tutorialize it a little bit? Because I think that's a thing that really pushes people over the edge is like, hey, this is how this works, and it's a lot simpler than what it would sound, when you,
I have a little bit of that with the Avid Assistant tutorial, and I'm planning on doing some more of it when I get back from the convention that I'm going to this coming week. Pro tip: don't launch a Kickstarter on the same. Don't launch a Kickstarter on the same week that you're doing 2 conventions back to back.
Oh,
yeah,
because Kickstarter is a full-time thing, really.
Yeah, that's our advice on that one to everybody is like touch it every day. Put an update.
Something every day. Something. I'm
I'm
definitely going to get this starter kit. Sorry, I'm getting the starter kit. I got to get it after the show because no PayPal. I have to get my.
Well, if you're going to the convention this weekend,
which convention?
Get somebody to video. Yeah, which one?
The convention I'm going to is Fire and Ice up in Manitowoc.
That doesn't exist. That's not real. Manitowoc. That's not a real place. I don't believe.
No, that sounds like an Indian.
I don't believe that's the name of a place. I don't believe that's the name of a place.
No, it's actually haunted.
It's a real place. It's also the place where Making a Murder. It's the place that Making a Murder is about.
What? So is that in where is that?
And also Pet Cemetery.
Manitowoc. Oh, it's in Wisconsin. I see. Right on Lake Michigan.
I thought it was Canada.
It sounds like it would be, but no, it's Wisconsin, right on the Manitowoc River. It's not. It's a little place. It's a little itty bitty place. It's teeny. Wait a minute. Oh, it's kind of it's almost in that weird peninsula that Wisconsin has. You know what I mean? But not quite.
Because the peninsula is surrounded by water, so.
Yeah, but you get all the off-season Gen Con.
No, peninsula is.
Because you're in Wisconsin.
A peninsula is 3 sides surrounded by water, and Wisconsin does have a thing. It's got a little like Finger Peninsula.
Oh, hey, listen.
Look, east.
Let's not talk about this thing, okay? That's not nice.
I'm just
glad he said finger because that's not what I was expecting. So anyway,
I'm trying to curse less. Anyway,
so when you go to this convention, you should have your beautiful young assistant, whoever that is, but have them film your presentation at the convention and slap that up in the Kickstarter, and you'd be good. Because you're probably better explaining it in front of a room full of people than like 1-to-1 staring at a camera.
I see the Fire and Ice convention, guys. Admission is not very expensive. It's $25 for 3 days, all 3 days.
Well, that's what?
That's not
nice.
It's the plane ticket that would kill me.
That is not bad. I mean, $10 for Friday, $15 for Saturday, and $10 for Sunday, and $5 for children. And if you want to bring anyone under 5, quote unquote, a non-player or a non-player observer, they're free.
How much do you charge for autographs?
This isn't like Comic-Con where...
So there's not like a line to see him like Carrie Fisher?
This isn't like Comic-Con where you have Boomer from the original Battlestar Galactica and Aaron Gray from Buck Rogers sitting behind a table hoping someone will pay them. That's so sad. That's like the saddest part of any convention is I feel so bad for some of those guys.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah,
sorry.
So the video thing, because I want to see it played. And I think a lot of people do, because it's like I've got limited attack vector. Like I've played it myself to just kind of get my head around it, and it, like you said, it doesn't seem that bad, once you get in. But just reading through the rules, it's kind of like, oh wow. But then again, you break out like Car Wars and you start reading the rules, and it looks a little more complicated than it is too. So, yeah.
Yeah, the video on the Kickstarter doesn't really have any gameplay. It's kind of a pre-rendered thing, and then I'm not watching it with audio. I'm guessing that's you, Ken, in the video?
Yes, that is me in the video doing the talking head stuff.
That's an amazing goatee. I just have to say that is very, very impressive. I'm not even kidding. That is a fantastic goatee.
Oh, see, now I got to go there and look
It's
at that.
powerful.
Make sure that his...
It's powerful. It reminds me of Ming the Merciless.
Mirror
really? It's all
Universe
pointy?
Spock.
Or Mirror Universe Spock. It's kind of got that point a little bit, you know?
It
See,
does.
I don't know
It
anything
does.
about board games. That's why I have to come in with random shit like this, so I talk it all on this podcast besides the introduction. Or else I'd be like, where's Brian? No one knows where Brian is. He just walked off to play with his cats.
Hey, the cats need bedding too.
They do. They've been bugging me the entire show, walking under my legs and stuff. Just like, hey,
My
pet
God,
me.
that is powerful. That's similar
Right?
between Ming and Colonel Sanders.
I'm telling you, I see Ming. I get the coloring is more Colonel Sanders, but the shape is pure Ming. That's what I see.
Wait, I must have missed this. Where was this link?
This is on
Here,
the
I'll send you a link.
It's on the Kickstarter video.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
It's on the Kickstarter.
I was on the page. I was like, where is this on the?
No, it's the video, and that is.
No, that's a
See, that's serious, man.
That's a Mirror Universe Spock right
That
there.
is-
That's
yeah.
amazing.
Definitely a member of the Beard Club for Men.
Fantastically sculpted. I'm not even joking around. That is fantastically sculpted.
You
Yeah,
guys,
so Brian, you shaved, right? Because Hunter's growing his back. I've, of course,
Whoa.
would never be
I don't know if
without
you've
mine.
seen. I don't know if you've seen a recent
I-
photo
I
of me,
have-
but
I
it's
have-
getting pretty intense.
Yeah,
I've
you look like
definitely
Grizzly Adams last I saw.
Jim, I've definitely shaved at least once since we met 2
Okay.
years ago. Is that
Well, there you go.
Well, I once
But
sent,
anyway.
I sent out a meme, but even went in the Space Game Junkies Facebook group that said, "This is Khan. Khan's attack patterns show two-dimensional thinking. Don't be like Khan.
It's
Play
true.
attack vector."
That's
Nice.
Nice. That was his big failing. I do think it's kind of fine that that's like maybe the only time Star Trek has ever even mentioned the Z.
Yeah, because everything else in Star Trek is always in like this fictional like space only goes vertical so much.
Like I love
And
in Deep Space Nine where they're having these massive battles and they're like, we'll never get through. Go up. Go above them. Why are you doing
Yeah.
that? You know.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing, right?
I get it's for
so-
drama and I get it's for simplicity and I get it's television, but sorry.
Yeah, but the thing is, video games, right? Video games tend to emulate Hollywood, right? So, like that, you have. I mean, look at Homeworld, right? Homeworld actually has. I'll call it altitude because the ships, when you tell them to move up or down on the plane, but whenever they get there, then they level out, and all the ships have the same, up and down, right? Whereas whenever you look at something like Nexus, the Jupiter incident, there's no up, no down, and there, in fact, there's no, go to this coordinate. It's more like EVE Online, where it's like go nearer or further from this thing, right? Because everything in space is a point of reference rather than coordinates.
Let's bring up Rebel Galaxy at that.
Oh, well, yeah, Rebel Galaxy is a game played on a tabletop, but because there's not even any altitude there. But I like it for that simplicity, right? Because they just abstracted the shit out of it, and it's okay, because it's a cartoon anyway, right?
Wasn't a complaint. I was just making an observation.
No, but
because it's a great game.
Yeah,
Well,
but
I can
agree.
make an argument that space combat will either be one-dimensional or three-dimensional. I cannot make an argument that space combat will be two-dimensional. You can make an argument that space combat is one-dimensional simply by having the weapon ranges be so long that compared to the maneuver capabilities of the ship, that maneuver doesn't matter, at which point the only thing you care about is distance. And I can make an argument that it's three-dimensional, and I pretty much do with attack vector and Squadron Strike. To make space combat two-dimensional, you have to do really strange things with physics and geometry.
Well, the way that I've seen it done, and this would translate to 2 dimensions. I mean, EVE Online is 3 dimensions, but vertical does not matter. So what matters there is distance and angular velocity. Specifically, if I have a smaller ship and I can turn tighter than you, you have a big ship, your turrets cannot turn as fast as I can orbit around you. Therefore, you have a harder time hitting me because you're like a clock, right? You're only right 1 hour, like whenever I pass in front of the hour hand, you get to take a shot at me because you can never actually catch up to me. So that's kind of the tactic in that game is like, what range do you want to be at, and what velocity do you orbit the target at? in order to screw his gun solution up. And that's really the only defense you have in that thing.
But that's very much a game design construct. Because why should my guns be limited to such a range where I can't actually shoot you while shoot you at a longer range? If they're in friggin' turrets and you're a small little ship, I should be able to target you and go kaplink, kaplink, kapow and thin the herd.
Oh yeah, if you get me before I get within range to actually cause you trouble, yes. And they do. They have sniper ships for that, but it's still you're kind of preoccupied shooting the other giant battle cruiser and not so much the little frigates. So the little frigates swarm around you like gnats and are a pain in the ass. So you have to have point defense turrets to take care of that. I like their mechanic. It's interesting. I haven't seen a lot of other games do that though, because most games seem fixated with you're playing it like it's on a tabletop map. You put a pin in the table, you say go here, and that's not really, I don't think, how space would work, right? Because you go here relative to what, right? So it's basically relative to the ship I'm pointing at. Go closer or further from him.
Except that what you're describing is once again something of a game designer construct, and it's really trying to recreate the feel of World War II ships fighting off incoming swarms of fighters. And that's a great feel. Don't get me wrong; it's a great feel. It may not be and there's nothing wrong with modeling your space combat off of World War II if that's the feel you're going to. I mean, hey, it worked for George Lucas.
So what about this? What about Harpoon in space?
Harpoon in space is actually another model that gets brought up a lot. And the problem with Harpoon in space is that Harpoon is very much built off of modern naval warfare, obviously. And modern naval warfare, all of the interesting decisions happen before the guns fire. Once you actually have accurate information on where something is and what it is, maneuver doesn't matter. So it is not very cinematic. It's basically a bunch of processing intel reports. It's a bunch of processing sensor reports. It is trying to play hide and seek with bazookas. And it's actually, in terms of video games, it's more like a stealth game.
Mm-hmm.
If I were trying to do Harpoon in space, I would actually be modeling it off of Arkham.
What's Arkham?
Arkham Asylum, the Batman, the Batman stealth games.
Oh, okay.
That's the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that I would try to do. But the problem is that a stealth game that is basically Batman versus Batman Prime. If you're trying to do Batman versus Batman Prime in a stealth game, the end result is that everybody spends all their time looking for one another and nobody shoots.
Yeah, well, there was a debate that we had for a long time on here about how cool would it be to have a submarine kind of space game, because I don't know, name classic DOS boot computer game, right? Silent Service or whatever. The problem that we found out though is, and you read Atomic Rockets, right? The website. I'm sure
contribute a fair bit. Contribute a fair bit to it.
All right, what have you not done? Give me 5 things.
I can neither confirm.
Did you work on The Secret of Vulcan Fury for Interplay? Did you work on that?
Oh my God.
I can
There's
neither
a funny
confirm
story there.
I can neither confirm nor deny that I've worked on The Secret of Vulcan Fury.
God damn!
I can also neither confirm nor deny that I have had that I have taken Kate Upton out on a date.
Son of a bitch!
Wait, what?
She's a nice girl.
Who's Kate Upton?
The girl that sells that video game for like $2 million a day.
Go Google Kate Upton. Yeah.
Go get Sports Illustrated. You'll be fine.
Oh, hey,
go open up a browser.
Yeah.
Go open up a browser tab.
Photos.
Yeah, go open up a browser tab. Google Kate Upton. You're welcome.
She's very pretty.
Yes, she is, Brian. Voluptuous, even.
Yeah.
Say that.
But we found, as you're probably jumping to as you lead up to the submarines and space issue,
there's no stealth in space article.
Thermodynamics ruins your day, which is actually the core precept of that ebook that I mentioned earlier on in the podcast, The Hot Equations. Thermodynamics and military science fiction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's basically the moment that I touch the engines, everybody in the universe knows where I am. Well, within, the only hope that I have is distance, because speed of light only travels so fast. So they're not going to really see where I am until maybe I have a chance to be somewhere else. But they're going to see any course correction I make, so they're going to be able to predict where I went.
Yep.
So the only thing I can do is hide behind a big rock and hope nobody sees me.
Except that even hiding behind a big rock, when you're orbiting it, it means you're going to be in front of the rock for some of the time.
Yeah.
So, yes, stealth in space is one of those things that, well, one of the reasons why I wrote that ebook was because I got really tired, really, really, really tired of rehashing the same argument again and again and again and again and again and again about what if I do this? What if I do this? What if I do this? What if I do this?
Yeah,
people would throw out a zillion and one, where people throw out a zillion harebrained schemes and none of them will actually work because they can't imagine a universe where you actually see somebody coming long before you get to weapon range. So they very desperately want some sort of stealth in space because they desperately want that to be their model for combat.
Yeah, so since you can see them long before you can shoot at them, why isn't your space combat also kind of a harpoon scenario, right? So it's not a detection game, but it's just a thing of like, okay, who shoots first wins, right?
The primary reason for that is that in harpoon, the primary reason for why it isn't he who shoots first wins in Attack Vector and Squadron Strike. One, much better armor, much better armor. Two, in harpoon, when you hit a ship with a missile, you're putting a hole in the ship. When you put a hole in the ship, water comes in. When water comes into your ship, the ship starts to sink. In space, if you put a hole in the ship, that component is breached. That compartment is breached. You've probably got a great big huge burning white hot hole through the ship that, if it's a laser, is probably about a foot in diameter. But the ship is still perfectly capable of fighting.
So are these ships actually? What sort of engine technology is going on? Because you and I, we had this conversation 8 years ago about the thermodynamics, and the actual limiting factor is heat dissipation, because you can only do so much without cooking the crew, and that's why the whole ass of your ship is a giant radiator, is because you're trying desperately to get rid of as much heat as you can, and there's no medium in space to do that. So, it's not like you can run air past the radiator faster or something.
So in Attack Vector, we use magic hand wavium technology to get some very high density plasmas. We use some magic hand wavium technology to get some very high density plasmas out there, because otherwise those radiator bells in the back of the ship would be about 8 times the diameter that they are.
Are you guys writing this down out there? You listeners, are y'all writing this down? This is a lot of information.
Because really, I had thought, well, why don't you have almost like a solar sail? Because it's about surface area, right? Mm-hmm. So you would want just a giant, very thin metal thing that you can open up as wide as possible,
and that can sustain the temperatures that you need. Because thermodynamics means that the efficiency of your radiator goes up at the 4th power of the temperature. And as near as we can tell, the radiators on the backside of the ships in Attack Vector would be glowing at about 3,500 to 4,000 Kelvin, which is really blinkingly hot. And if we didn't have really high density plasmas in there, using some sort of hand wavium in there to make the plasmas work, instead of it being the picture that you see for the cover of Attack Vector, which you probably want to show to the people who are streaming the podcast, where you have the main hull of the ship being like a ball and a gantry work and a great big huge spiky radiator thing at the other end, that spiky radiator thing would be 8 times the diameter. And instead of it looking something like out of 2001: A Space Odyssey, it would look sort of like the head of a mace on the top of a crinoline skirt from the 1880s.
Yeah. So what about like the nuclear light bulb? Would that work?
That would work, and it wouldn't get you the thrust that we use in Attack Vector.
Well, that's the problem, is because you have to be fast enough to maneuver to keep the game interesting. But thrust to weight, you have to have such an astronomical amount of thrust that, so you have to do something there.
Right. In Attack Vector, there are two different modes of thrust. There's cruise mode, which is actually a pretty plausible thrust mode for thrust. It pushes out at about 4 to 8 millig's and is much more fuel efficient than the combat mode thrust. Combat mode thrust, we actually are thrusting in increments of eighth of a G, bone-shattering eighth of a G increments. We'll crush you to powder.
Well, the ships kind of remind me of the Discovery from 2001, right? Yes. So you have a crew ball in the front, and it's armored up and it's got guns hanging off of it. But other than that, it's a sphere. And then you have a stem and an engine, because you want to get the engine as far away from the squishy human people that like to be irradiated and die. So you keep the engines away from that. But then you have the whole center of the ship is a big fuel bladder. And I'm just thinking, well, that's what I want to shoot. I want to blow your fuel tank off, and then you're done.
So, one of the things that changes that is that when your combat ranges are increments of 20 kilometers, precision targeting becomes a little bit harder.
It's not like Star Trek, where you can be like, oh, target their engines.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if the majority of the ship, think it's a pencil, right? And the humans are in the eraser. The rest of the pencil is fuel tank, and then the lead is the engine. So I'm probably gonna hit your fuel tank.
Yeah, and if you ever take a look at an Attack Vector ship sheet, you'll find that there are a lot of entries for hit fuel tank on the damage allocation tables. The thing is that the people who are designing these ships expect the fuel tanks to get hit. And so they are very carefully making sure that they are survivable.
Right, so it's compartmentalized. And now, whenever I get a hit like that, then I'm actually checking off fuel. Like, you lost X number of boxes of fuel that you won't be able to spend in maneuver now.
Correct.
But then that lightens your ship too, so I might do you a favor.
You actually just mark off columns of fuel instead of marking it off on a row at a time as you burn it.
And there aren't enough computer games that cover this kind of detail.
I know, right? And that's the thing. That's why I wanted to get Ken on here, is because there's so much going on in this game, and he's thought about this, and of course you have to have some BS or it doesn't work, but he knows where the BS is, right? So it's not like the entire thing is that. It's just like, well, we were as close to real as we could get, but we still had to fake a few things, otherwise it wouldn't be an interesting game, right? So at some point you get a concession to gameplay, but other than that, it's kind of makes you think some profound thoughts about, well, what would we actually do in space combat other than just not do it, which I think is the best solution.
I tend to agree that it would be the best solution.
Well, how do you handle where combat happens? Is it always going to be pretty much in the gravity well of a planet? It's like there's nothing to fight over in deep space, so why would I be
pretty
there?
Pretty much it's going to be where there's something to fight over. And in the setting of the 10 worlds, that tends to either be around a planet, and we have orbital mechanics rules that actually give pilot perspective orbital mechanics. We also have a...
Does that mean you have to thrust against gravity, and you can also use gravity to kind of carry you on a trajectory?
Yes, actually. As you thrust prograde, you end up developing a secondary force that is pushing you away from the center of the planet. And when you thrust away from the center of the planet, you have a secondary force that is pushing you retrograde. When you thrust retrograde, you have a secondary force that is pushing you in towards the center of the planet. And when you thrust in towards the center of the planet, you have a secondary thrust that's pushing you prograde.
So if I have the right velocity, vector, and distance, then I'm going to just drop into an orbit.
Yep. In fact, it assumes that you're actually going to be in an orbit at the start, because basically once you actually try doing, say, two ships fight in retrograde orbit, you don't have a fight, you have mutual suicide.
Yeah, and I just want to point out again, this all happens on a piece of paper, not a computer game.
Yeah, in Attack Vector Tactical, In Attack Vector Tactical, we load algorithms from paper into wetware.
Yeah, I've got the tutorial PDF up in the stream now. I'm kind of glancing through it for Strike Vector, for Attack Vector.
You have to be
Tactical.
careful, or you might actually learn some physics here.
Yeah, it's very, very detailed. I'm kind of
he's taking the physics and he's wrapping it in peanut butter, and it's like trying to get a dog to take a pill.
I love how
you
there's
have to hide it.
I love how there's a whole side panel. One part says "Don't panic," and the other part says "A note on complexity." And there's a bunch of stuff here. This is great. See, someone recommended I read these because one of my favorite computer game manuals is for the rules of engagement games. I don't know if you've ever played those, but I
never have.
Those are probably the most detailed capital ship space computer games you'll find. I mean,
they were like what, late 80s?
No,
before complexity went out of style.
Early 90s, but close. It was like 90, and then it was like 92, so it was like a year or two apart. But so someone told me since I love reading those manuals, I would enjoy reading this, and I actually am. I'm just kind of skimming through it a little bit, and this is free, guys, on the website.
There's an address at the very bottom when you get done reading it that you have to write a letter to get your diploma mailed to you once you finish the course.
God damn it, Hunter! I actually believed you when I scrolled all the way down to the end, because I'm such a fucking gullible. Fucking gullible.
Where's the address? I don't see it.
Address? Oh! I tell you, got me again.
So Ken, how did you begin this descent into madness? Like, what was your first game that you did, and why did you make a game?
My first game that I did was writing a supplement for Starfleet Battles that eventually became Module C5, the Magellanic Cloud. In between when I wrote that and when it got published, I effectively became the executive developer for the Omega Sector stuff for Starfleet Battles. Actually, I should amend that. The very first game that I wrote was an RPG that I wrote in 1986 when I was 16, called Renegades, which was an attempt at making a science fiction cyberpunk RPG. And oh dear Lord, was it terrible.
Oh, you too, huh?
Oh yes, me too. This is one of those games where I will say, if you have a copy of it, I will pay you $20 for it, or I will pay you $40 for video of you burning it.
Oh my god.
But I actually wrote it, published it as a 16-year-old, and sold it. And the money that I made from selling it, I bought a second phone line up in Alaska, of all places, to run a bulletin board service for people to play online and interactively.
Wow. So how big would you say your player base is for this game? For Squadron, for your games, I'm sorry, for Attack Vector, Squadron Strike, that sort of thing?
My basic rule of thumb is that roughly one person in three registers their game. And right now I've got a little bit over 1,000 people register for Attack Vector and a little bit over 1,100 for Squadron Strike. And there is some overlap between the two of them.
And is that a good player base for a board game? I really don't know. That's why I'm asking. I really don't know. I mean, for a self-published one-man operation like yourself, is that a good player? Is that a solid player base?
Push the talk key.
That's right. That is a decent-sized player base, but the basic rule of thumb in board games and computer games is that anybody who makes a computer game, anybody who makes a board game, can probably sell 1,000 of anything. I know that I have actually sold more than 3,000 copies of these games combined. Because basically I've got, and probably closer to probably closer to 6,000 at that point, to be honest. My hope is that Squadron Strike Traveler will actually get me more customers and a broader customer base, and will help me reach out to other customer bases and the like.
So can we have the dream here of finally on the tabletop Star Wars fights Star Trek, and we see who's better? Can you handle that in here?
That is actually one of the fairly standard convention scenarios that I run.
Oh, really? Excellent. Which side usually wins?
Babylon 5.
It depends on the skills of the players, because it wouldn't be fun if I set it up so that Star Trek was always firing from faster to light movement and Star Wars wasn't, because then it becomes, well, pop, 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 pop. So you basically make it so that it's actually a fun scenario rather than pushing it on like.
Oh, that's
Yeah, and next time we get together, I need the explanation for how do you shoot a phaser when you're moving at warp 5, because I've never quite understood that.
It's simple physics.
Yeah. It's transwarp.
Simple physics, transwarp. It's exactly.
Yeah. Do you feel that JJ destroyed Star Trek?
Hand wavium. I love that. I'm stealing that for so many things now. Seriously, I'm just going to use that for everything.
Yeah. So I think we've pretty much covered it.
I think
and,
so.
I don't want to wear you out because
yeah, we've been going for almost 2 hours, so we don't want to overstay our welcome. But looks like your Kickstarter has already been funded. What are the stretch goals? What are the big stretch goals you want to do now that it's already been funded?
Well, the first big stretch goal was adding a 4th counter sheet. The second stretch goal that I want to do is miniatures, and I just is adding more miniatures, and I just had somebody delete their pledge while we were on the call here, because
what?
He deleted their pledge. They deleted their pledge while they were on the call because they say that my latest update did not fill them with confidence. They wanted to know why I didn't have quotes for getting miniatures before I launched the Kickstarter, and the long story made short is that I wasn't expecting to need those Kickstarter stretch goals until next week, and so everything's running a little bit faster than I was expecting.
Well, yay!
Yes.
See, that's the burden of success. That's what we call that.
I mean, congratulations on being funded, but yeah, it sounds like there are some chinks in that particular armor.
Yeah.
I look at it like this. I look at it like this. I appreciate every single backer that I've got. I appreciate all of the people who support the projects, and I don't hold it against anybody or really want to hold anybody up for mockery for dropping out of a project, because everybody has reasons for their own confidence on that. I have already
he could
had
come
to
back
deal
too once you post whatever he wants to know.
Yeah, and it is one of those things where. Basically his answer was, why didn't you get the quote before you launched the project? This gives me the impression that you're not very good at planning and organizing, which could spell disaster for this Kickstarter if something goes wrong, or worse, if it goes very well.
Wow.
I will be writing a reply to that says, hi, I have shipped every single miniature to my backers that I have promised in previous Kickstarters, and I don't intend to break for that now. But I honestly was expecting a slower burn on this one than I got. And I foolishly set up a Kickstarter to start at the same time that I was doing 2 weekends in a row at conventions. So yeah, you can actually ding me for for failure on planning, because well, I wasn't figuring I was going to need these stretch goals until later this week anyway.
Yeah. So how does the production part of this work? Like, as far as okay, you're going to get miniatures made and you're going to get boxed games made, so you have to find a printer that's going to do it. And then all these are like die cut counters, right? So so you have not only the printing but also the cutting of the stuff and all that. And I've talked to some people before that made small games, and it was just kind of like, yeah, I got sticker sheets and I'm like cutting these things with an X-Acto knife in my kitchen, and it was
so when it comes to the printing games. All of the Ad Astra titles have some common components. The plastic tilt blocks, the plastic stacking tiles, the things along and the box miniature sheets. I have a vendor that I source for the box miniature sheets. I have a vendor that I source for the box wraps and the other outside printing stuff. But I print and bind all the rule books in-house. I have my own printing plant.
Oh.
It was more capital up front, but it means that I actually get to go and run a fairly lean production cycle. I have a miniatures vendor company that prints that spins all my miniatures for me now, and I'm in talks with them to have them do instead of sending me bins of miniatures that I then sort into orders. of just basically having them sending me packaged pallets of miniatures so that I just have to pull something off the shelf and put it in a box. Because as a one-person operation, I just don't have the time anymore to actually hand assemble miniatures orders.
Oh, that's cool though. So whenever I crack open my box of Attack Vector, all those sheets of origami ships, those actually like rolled out of a printer in your basement then?
No, the box miniatures I have printed outside and die cut outside.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Nice.
All right, so it's the rule books and such.
Right.
Yeah, it's the rule books and such.
Oh, that sounds like a good place to wrap it up. Sorry, it's getting late. So your Kickstarter is still going for a couple more weeks, I think. And you've already been funded. Congratulations. Mm-hmm. But, you have stretch goals now. So, folks, check out the Squadron Strike Traveler Kickstarter. The link will be in the video notes as well as the notes for the podcast. Next week, doing something slightly different. Our guests are overseas. They're in Greece. So because of that, it's going to be an early morning podcast, 6 a.m. Pacific time, which means no Jim and no Hunter. Sorry, gentlemen.
I'll be missed.
It's Wing Commander Flat Universe next week, and the brothers who are making it are in Greece. So yeah, it's either that or can't do it really in the middle of the night for them. So
there's a chance I might be there, but we'll see.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, okay.
So
that's 9 a.m. your time. I thought you guys would be at work, but if you can be there, great.
Is it flat Wing Commander because they couldn't afford the altitude?
Yeah, they couldn't afford that.
So
they couldn't afford that
like
third
an
dimension.
Eastern European.
They totally couldn't afford that third dimension. Where the hell was I? Okay. So yeah, folks, next week the podcast will be in the morning at 6 a.m. Pacific time. Just FYI. And this week, we're going to be playing Quintet on Thursday with the developers. We're going to be giving away keys for the game for Steam. So
you get a car, and you get a car.
You get a Quintet.
Like, what keys to what? I thought we were going to.
And you get a Quintet, and you get a Quintet, and it's
five of them. In fact.
5 musicians will show up at your house. And
is it a mariachi thing?
No, it's classical. It's classical. But folks, I want to thank you all for listening and watching. Ken, this has been very enlightening. I'm sorry I didn't talk much, but I know nothing about this sort of stuff. So, Jim and Hunter,
now you do.
Jim and Hunter, thank you for picking up the slack and being excellent interviewers.
I just want to end with this.
Mm-hmm.
Picture the scene.
Okay.
A wizard and a farm boy walk into a bar.
Uh-huh.
They need a pilot to get them to where they're going.
Uh-huh.
I just that just. Yep.
Okay, so you have a wizard and a farm boy, and Han Solo's kind of a rogue.
A rogue. He's the rogue.
And what's Chewbacca?
Chewbacca's clearly a barbarian.
I was going to say he's the barbarian.
You also have 2 familiars.
Right.
You also have the 2 familiars. They're outside. The bar doesn't want the familiars in there. No magic. So.
Well, no, I would think R2-D2 is more hobbity because he's short yet useful.
You know what I could do?
And C-3PO is clearly an elf because
C-3PO is the Legolas of Star Wars. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
No, he isn't. Oh God, no. No one's as pretty as.
You probably didn't recognize him because of his arm.
No one's as pretty as Orlando Bloom. Okay.
Does that make Jar Jar a bard?
Oh no.
And on that note, good night.
Nice to be here with you guys, and somebody needs to get that man a drink.
Sorry.
2 men walk into a bar, the third one ducks.